and say to you, even you have been made weak as we. You have become like us. I've already explained that Sheol is the place to which departed souls go after the separation from the physical body. Sheol is not the ultimate destiny of departed souls. It's a place of temporary imprisonment, awaiting final resurrection and judgment. But we'll see that later in my series of talks. Turning now again to this description in Isaiah chapter 14, verses 9 and 10, the descent of the soul of the king of Babylon into Sheol, we note some very important points. First of all, there is no indication that those departed souls have any ongoing knowledge of current events on earth. Secondly, however, there is definite indication that they have a recollection of their previous condition on earth. Thirdly, there is a definite persistence of personality. Fourth, there's a recognition of one person by another. Fifth, there's communication between one person and another. Sixth, there's an awareness of present conditions in Sheol. And seventh, there's a correspondence between the state of the departed soul as it was on earth and its state in Sheol. That is to say, those who were kings on earth are still recognized as kings in Sheol. Now, in Ezekiel chapter 32, verses 18 through 32, there's a similar but much longer picture of God's judgment on Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and on many other Gentile kings and their armies who had been slain in battle. This passage is too long for us to look to right now, but it reproduces essentially all the features that we found in Isaiah chapter 14, verses 9 through 10. I will just briefly recapitulate those features because they're of great importance. I mentioned 7 features. First of all, there was no indication that those departed souls had any knowledge of continuing events on earth. Secondly, however, they did have a recollection of previous conditions on earth. Third, there was a definite persistence of personality. Fourth, there was a recognition of one person by another. Fifth, there was communication between one person and another. Sixth, there was an awareness of the present conditions in Sheol. And seventh, there was some kind of correspondence between the state of departed souls as they were on this earth and their state in Sheol, in the sense that kings on earth were still recognized as kings. In the New Testament, we have a picture given by Jesus himself of what happens to souls that depart this life. This is the story of Lazarus the beggar and the rich man outside whose gate he was laid, desiring to be fed with the scraps that fed from the rich man's table. We'll start at the point in the story where both died. This is Luke 16, verses 22 through 26. Now it came about that the poor man died, that's Lazarus, and he was carried away by the angels to Abraham's bosom. And the rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades he, that's the rich man, lifted up his eyes, being in torment, and saw Abraham afar away, and Lazarus in his bosom. And he cried out and said, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus, that he may dip the tip of his finger in water, and cool off my tongue, for I am in agony in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that during your life you received your good things, and likewise Lazarus bad things. But now he is being comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you there is a great chasm fixed, in order that those who wish to come over from here to you may not be able, and that none may cross over from there to us. Now remember that these are the words of Jesus himself, the most reliable of all authorities. And remember also that it is nowhere stated that this is a parable. It is a record of actual events that took place in the period before the death and resurrection of Jesus. Jesus' account repeats many features from the Old Testament. First of all, we notice that the body returns to the earth, but the soul passes out into the unseen world, in the New Testament called Hades. In this unseen world, there are the following features, all of which are carried over from the account in the Old Testament. First of all, there's a recollection of previous conditions on earth. It's rather interesting that Abraham actually said to the rich man, "Remember that during your life you received good things." So clearly there's remembrance of previous conditions on earth. Secondly, there's a persistence of personality. Lazarus was still Lazarus. Abraham was still Abraham. The rich man was still the rich man, though no longer rich. Then again, there was a recognition of one person by another. The rich man recognized both Abraham and Lazarus. Also, there was a consciousness of present conditions. Particularly, the rich man was very conscious of the agony of the torment that he found himself in. However, there is one important extra feature that's added in this account by Jesus. And the feature is that there is a complete separation between the righteous and the unrighteous. Though both are in this place reserved for the souls of the departed, they are in completely different sections of that place. And there's a great difference between what's happening to them. The wicked rich man is in torment. He's being tormented in flame. But the righteous man, the poor man, is in rest. The place of rest that he's in is described as Abraham's bosom. The mention of Abraham particularly indicates that it's for those who follow in the steps of Abraham's faith. One other important feature brought out by this account of Jesus, it is that God's angels took charge of the soul of Lazarus. Angels carried him to his place of rest. We find that this is also duplicated in the experience of the wicked. Angels, Satan's angels, take charge of the souls of the wicked. In Revelation 6:8, John the Revelator says, "I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider's name was Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over a fourth of the earth, to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth." So we see there that both death and Hades are persons. They are, in fact, satanic angels. It's usually taught that death has power over men's bodies. Hades has power over men's souls. Death causes men to die. Hades, who follows behind him, takes charge of the souls of the wicked departed and carries them away into the place of torment and imprisonment that is appointed for them. So we see in these passages, both from Old and from New Testament, a picture that's always consistent and has many vivid details of the destiny of departed souls. That is in the period before the death and resurrection of Jesus. Our time is up for today, but I'll be back with you again tomorrow at this time. Tomorrow I'll explain the change that took place in the unseen world as a result of the death and resurrection of Jesus, and the different destiny that now awaits the departing souls of the righteous. Yesterday I began to deal with a subject that always captivates man's imagination. What comes after death? We looked at some pictures that the Bible gives of what happens to men's souls after death as they pass out into the unseen world. We saw that certain features recur in the various passages. First of all, there is some recollection of previous conditions on earth. Second, there is a definite persistence of personality. Third, there is a recognition of one person by another. Fourth, there is communication between one person and another. Fifth, there's an awareness of present conditions in the unseen world. And sixth, there's some kind of correspondence with their previous state on earth. For example, those who were kings on earth are still recognized as kings in the unseen world. However, there was one further important feature revealed by Jesus himself in the story of Lazarus and the rich man, and that is that there was complete and permanent separation between the souls of the righteous and the souls of the unrighteous. The souls of the righteous were in a place of rest, entitled Abraham's bosom, but the souls of the unrighteous were in a place of imprisonment and torment. Today I'm going to explain how, after the death of Jesus, while his body lay in the tomb, his soul descended into Hades, and as a result, certain important and permanent changes took place. The record of these events is found primarily in the first epistle of Peter. We need to look at two distinct statements. First of all, in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 through 20. For Christ also died for sins, once for all, the just for the unjust, in order that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison, who once were disobedient when the patience of God kept waiting in the days of Noah, during the construction of the ark, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through the water. So that speaks about Christ in the Spirit, still not in his body, descending into Hades, and it describes how he made a proclamation to spirits of unrighteous persons who were in prison. The particular persons specified were those who had been disobedient to God and broken God's laws in the days of Noah. The second passage in 1 Peter is in chapter 4, verse 6. For the gospel has for this purpose been preached even to those who were dead, that though they are judged in the flesh as men, they may live in the Spirit according to the will of God. Now, this is not the same as the previous statement. There's an important difference. Different words are used in the Greek. In the first passage, it says that Jesus made a proclamation. But in the second passage, it says the gospel was preached. The gospel, of course, is the good news that always centers around the death and resurrection of Jesus. Now, what was the difference, and what exactly happened? I believe it was this way. Let's look at, first of all, what happened to the righteous believers in Abraham's bosom. To them, Jesus brought good news, the gospel. The good news was, the price for sin has now been paid by my death and my shed blood. Consequently, God is now prepared to give you complete pardon and to release you from this place of waiting. Their bodies had suffered sin's penalty, which was death, but their souls received God's pardon through their faith in Jesus. Now, let's look at what happened to the unrighteous in prison. Jesus made to them a proclamation. As far as I know, there's nowhere in the Bible that tells us what this proclamation was. I like to phrase it in terms such as this. Jesus said, "This place is now under new management." Why do I say that? Well, let's look at what Jesus says to John on the Isle of Patmos when he appears to him in his glory in Revelation 1, verses 17 and 18. John says, "And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as a dead man. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying, 'Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last and the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive evermore. And I have the keys of death and of Hades.'" So, by his death and by his propitiatory sacrifice, Jesus earned the right to wrest from the hands of those two satanic angels, death and Hades, the keys to that place of imprisonment. Consequently, from then on, Jesus had the right and the ability to release those who had been pardoned and to liberate them. And this he did. Then, when he ascended out of Hades, and when he then ascended right into heaven, he took with him the liberated souls from Abraham's bosom. This is referred to in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 8 through 10. Therefore it says, "When he ascended on high," that's Jesus, "he led captive a host of captives." That was, those who were the captives of Hades became Jesus' captives through his atoning sacrifice and through the price that he'd paid of his